What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with Tech Daily, and in this video, we are checking out the new Samsung Galaxy S21. I have both the regular S21 and the S21 Plus here, so we'll do some comparisons as well. I'll show you the size differences and fill you in on everything else you need to know about these two phones. But first things first, let's go ahead and unbox them and see what all comes inside the package. Now, you might be able to tell that Samsung followed in Apple's footsteps here and really limited the size of the actual box, and also what all comes inside as far as the included accessories and things. So keep that in mind as we dive on in here. Pulling off the lid of the box, the first thing we get is just a little piece of cardboard with the Samsung logo, and underneath that we see the phones themselves. I got the S21 in the Phantom Violet color, obviously. The S21 Plus is in Phantom Silver, which I actually think looks really nice. And we'll take a closer look at the phones in just a second. But inside the box, you can see we really don't get much more. There's one final little cardboard package here. The SIM ejector tool is fastened to the outside, and inside the box you'll find a stack of paperwork and just one included accessory, a USB-C cable. That's it. No more wall plug, no earbuds, no ODB connector, nothing else included anymore. And it's the same with both phones, just the included cable and paperwork. And like I said, Samsung basically just followed Apple in eliminating the extra accessories and packing material to essentially cut down on waste. So the new S21 and S21 Plus this year obviously look pretty familiar to previous flagship Samsung devices, at least from the front. But there are a number of design changes, add-ons, and new features that might entice you to upgrade, I think. Right off the bat, if you're looking for just a straight comparison between these two phones, the first difference obviously is going to be the size. The smaller S21 is a 6.2-inch phone, while the larger S21 Plus comes in at 6.7 inches. Side by side, you can see that most of the extra screen real estate with the S21 Plus is in height, though it is just a little wider as well. In the hand, the larger phone is also a bit heavier, and nowadays I'd almost characterize the regular S21 as a rather comfortable device at its size. Almost small, but not quite. While the larger S21 Plus is sort of the size I think a lot of us have probably gotten used to by now, especially from Samsung. It's pretty big, but not quite the largest phone we've seen. Up front, you can see we've got nearly a frameless design. So the phones are almost entirely all screen, which definitely keeps the bulk down. There's a small camera cutout up top, and you can barely see the bezels all around. One other thing to note, Samsung seems to have pretty much dropped any sort of curved glass or infinity display on their smartphones now. These new S21s have a totally flat front panel all the way to the edge, and I know some people like to see that. Obviously, the front of these new S21s are very familiar, but around back you can see we do get a fresh new design. And one important thing to mention, another difference between these phones, is in the materials. The smaller, cheaper, regular S21 gets a plastic rear housing, similar to the Note 20 and S20 FE from last year, while the S21 Plus has a glass rear housing. Now, to be totally honest, the feel and finish on both phones to me is pretty much identical. It's a smooth, matte texture. You might be able to tell by tapping with your finger that the S21 Plus has a bit thicker material since it is actual glass, but I really don't think most people would notice. I think both phones look great in these color combinations as well. The purple and gold is really nice, but my favorite is definitely this Phantom Silver on the S21 Plus. When it hits the light just right, you can see it gives off that subtle rainbow effect, and it really is a unique look without going totally over the top. Now, even though the rear housings differ, everything else physically with these two phones is going to be exactly the same. They both have all aluminum frames with a polished finish, and that not only looks great, but it also gives the phone their high-end flagship feel and a decent amount of weight in the hand. And obviously, this year the camera module around back has been totally redesigned as well. I wasn't so sure how I felt about this when I first saw the phones, but I've actually grown to like it a bit now. The polished metal sort of flows over the lenses, which looks super nice, and the camera bump is kind of no more now. There's a slight raise, which you can probably tell, but it's really not bad. And all in all, between the unique color combinations and the refreshed design, I do think the new S21s look really good. Now, interestingly enough, aside from the size difference and the glass versus plastic rear housing, everything else with these two phones physically is exactly the same. Also, the features and most of the specs, there's really nothing else that separates them this year. If you want more phone now, you'll have to totally jump up to the S21 Ultra. Taking a look around, you can see that there's nothing on the left side of the phones, nothing really up top either besides some microphone holes. On the right, the usual power and volume buttons, and down below, the SIM tray, now on these S21s, is just the SIM tray, no expandable storage here, which is a bummer. Obviously, you also have the USB-C charging port and bottom speaker. There's also a secondary speaker in the earpiece on both phones for stereo sound, and I think these phones offer really great out loud listening experiences. Here's a sample of each so you can get an idea. Up front, both phones, of course, also have an in-display fingerprint sensor, and this is a new and improved setup for the S21s. In using it now for a little bit, I have to say it is ridiculously fast. The sensor area itself is also a bit larger too, and that's going to make it easier to tap on the first try. I haven't had a single blip or hiccup at all so far. It's been crazy good, and I'm glad to not only have it still, but also to see that it's been noticeably improved. Samsung obviously put some effort behind this setup, and it was a great move. Both phones also have a face unlock option as well, and that too is very quick. In regards to the displays, this year it seems like Samsung did sort of downgrade what we get on these flagship phones in a way, and this change has been a little controversial. So obviously we have a dynamic AMOLED screen at a maximum refresh rate of 120 Hz, and that was expected. It's a super smooth and really great setup, but the resolution of the displays now are maxed out at 1080p. Last year, we had the choice of 120 Hz or 1440p. We could flip back and forth between them in settings. This year, Samsung just dropped the higher resolution completely, at least for the S21 and S21 Plus. You can get 1440p on the Ultra, and I guess Samsung figured that most people prefer a high refresh rate display. I know I certainly do, but it's one of those things where it's just a shame to see a feature taken away, especially on a flagship phone. But fortunately, the 120 Hz screen on these devices is awesome. You still get a fairly high resolution anyway as well, 421 pixels per inch on the S21 and 394 on the S21 Plus. Samsung, I think, still offers the best viewing experience in the business with their screens, and I have no complaints. They're super bright, they're very colorful. The default color profile is obviously always a bit saturated, and like always, you can adjust that. But I've liked this look, and for the most part, this is exactly the content watching experience I'd expect from a flagship Samsung phone. Now inside, these new flagship devices have the latest 2021 specs. Depending on where in the world you live, you'll either get the Snapdragon 888 processor or the Exynos 2100. They both also ship with 8 gigs of RAM and a choice of either 128 or 256 gigabytes of storage. And like I said earlier, everything is going to be the same with these two phones with the internals. And if you want more RAM, for example, and actually more storage too, up to 512 gigabytes, you will have to jump up to the Ultra here as well. The only other thing that is different is actually the battery capacity. The smaller S21 is powered by a 4000 milliamp capacity battery, while the larger S21 Plus gets a 4800 milliamp inside. And to me, the factor that might even this out a little bit is the larger display on the larger phone. It'll consume more battery power, but in general, you should see better battery life with the S21 Plus anyway. Obviously, out of the box, both these phones feel lightning fast, as they should. Not only do they have the latest and greatest specs, but also the latest updates as well. There's Android 11 paired with Samsung's new One UI 3.1, and honestly, there's just not much more to say here. These are of course going to be some of the fastest and most powerful smartphones on the market right now, especially with the chipsets inside. I think Samsung has also done a fantastic job with One UI as well. The slight changes and refresh look pretty good. Everything flows really nicely. And these are exactly the fresh, fast, fully capable flagship phones you would expect. Finally, around back, both these new phones have the same great camera setup that I think offers a nice balance of interesting features. The main lens is a 12 megapixel f1.8 aperture shooter. There's a 64 megapixel telephoto lens for optical and hybrid zoom that Samsung I think is sort of known for now, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide thrown in as well. Now, I'm really looking forward to putting this camera setup to the test here and comparing it to some other devices in the coming days. I think there's a lot to like. You've got those crazy unique features like 8K video recording at 24 FPS, which I know few people will probably use, but it's awesome at least to have something like that on a smartphone. There's 30 times zoom as well, which isn't as crazy as like the Ultra's super zoom moon gazing abilities, but I think it's a solid option anyway, and actually pretty useful in comparison. Overall, these are phones that are going to take fantastic pictures in every occasion for sure. Also, the selfie cameras here on both phones are the same 10 megapixel f2.2 aperture lenses. Just a quick sample shot out of the box looks pretty great. Like I said, all the same setup and everything, so you're getting an identical result. Now, I do think it is a bit of a shame that between the S21 and S21 Plus now, you don't get more capabilities or features with the camera. We sort of used to get that in previous years, but all in all, I think there's still a lot to like. So there you go. Those are my initial thoughts and first impressions, at least, on these new S21 devices. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though, and I'll see you guys later.